This presentation will cover a paper that has just been published in Frontiers in Climate Change. And so it's open access paper, Unwinding the Spiral of Silence in Rural America, looking backward with stories to plan forward. This is a product of the CCP team. So we were the Cultivating Community Preparedness team that we drew ourselves together with a Provost Strategic Initiative of $5,000, which tells you something about free labor. And this project came out of, I had been turned on to scenario planning, and as a historian of religions, what I realized is this is modern religion. This is parable telling, this is coyote stories, this is communities doing social learning in ways that are meant to restore and reproduce themselves. And with that, as a historian of religions, I thought this is exactly what I want to do for what's left of my career in Wyoming, is I want to work in communities with this kind of world-making kinds of process. And as you can see from our team members, applied ag and economics, communications and journalism, ecosystem science, Ginger Page, one of the great hydrologists of the region, Katie Cooper, who has since left, but does media journalism, specifically uncertainty and the communication of uncertainty. Kristen Landerville, you heard about her survey. I was working with Kristen before that survey, and we did our own little survey. So some deep roots across today's presentations, and JJ Schinker, whose slides you're going to be seeing today. So the context for this paper, big picture, increasing water hazards in the West. And our goal is to foster dialogue about climate issues in rural communities. And I often say I have gone out and traveled and taught in different places. I'm back home and I'm back in the belly of the beast. And so this, I think, is quite a challenge. And it's been a wonderful learning curve. The research questions we raise in the paper itself are: how do rural Wyoming community members perceive recent climate conditions and water-related risks? And how do rural Wyoming community members perceive and discuss future scenarios? So this question of perception, knowing that perception is reality, is part of what our work is doing. Our method was first to do a survey, and like the survey reported on, this was a smaller survey that preceded it. We found that there was evidence of people being very widely interested, like above 75% interested and concerned, but saying they never speak about it. So we found evidence of what is in communications theory called a spiral of silence, where you self-silence because you feel like it is not a pro-social topic. And so you no longer are raising it. And so we wanted to say, can we design something to bring into rural communities to unwind that spiral of silence? So rather than tell you about it, I'd like to ask your participation in experience a bit with us how we designed it, and then we can discuss afterwards some of the theory. So early in the workshop, we do what we're calling the past scenario. And I'd start by showing you this and saying, anybody notice anything, any questions about these? On the top, we have the statewide average from 1921 to 2021 for average temperature with the trend line showing. And then on the bottom, we have precipitation with the trend line showing. And let me ask, does anyone in this room have an experience with drought that they can see on that slide? Or another water hazard? By which I mean the hailstorm that took out a field or your car, fire. Yeah.
I'll speak up. I don't know if this is on point, but I do a lot of Colorado River work, both here at UW and in the field, you know. I can't help but think of that 100+ foot bathtub ring around Lake Mead outside Las Vegas when I think about particularly the crap of talks.
And when you think about that, can you tell me a year, for instance, an experience in Wyoming that might have correlated with that?
I can tell you that 90% of the flows that go into that reservoir come from the winds, the Wasatch, the Uintas, the Colorado Rockies, and San Juans. I can tell you that much. So the snowpack in those mountains is the water that's in that reservoir or the lot thereof. But I don't know if that's what you're getting at.
Well, and let me ask you, how did you feel when you saw the bathtub rings?
I camped there last year in December. It was great. Felt like I was in a sci-fi novel. I was walking around and there's infrastructure that had been submerged and now is exposed, and it was straight out of like a Frank Herbert book, like Dune or something like that. It was really eerie.
And so what kind of feelings, just to expand a little bit more, let's say the first time you see an intake valve that's can no longer intake. Do you have
eerie?
Eerie.
Destabilizing for sure, even from an imaginative standpoint, like kind of post-apocalyptic looking landscape, you know? Like I'm living through what could very well be fictional writing of a good sci-fi author.
So thanks for that. Thanks for that feeling. And I'd like to ask yeah, go ahead, please.
You went closer to home, Haub run the Nordic ski area just up on the hill here. And I can tell you, because we've charted it over the last 30 years, the season gets shorter. And that's just snowball at temperature.
And if we look at that trend line for temperatures, would you say that in your life as a cross-country skier, does that blue trend line relate to your experience?
Yeah, I think that's it.
And part of what we found in our survey, so I'm breaking out here, part of what we found in our survey was that people in Wyoming were generally saying these very things, that they are experiencing warmer, but they are not seeing as much of a trend for precipitation. And that's exactly, and we used those survey results, told us this is the right slide to use, because we can reconfirm part of what Wyoming says, right? So we're trying to build that trust space and be able to build off of people's stories. Okay, so then, now with that last slide, what you were seeing on the left was a 30-year average, which is what climate scientists like to work with. And what you were seeing on the right was a conservative model, climate model, of where temperatures will go. And I will go back one. I think it's going to stay like that now. And say, what did you notice? A lot of orange. One of the reasons we can use this slide is because people recognize Wyoming. People they know those are the bighorns and that's the Wind Rivers, and right? So that we can let the slide do the talking and we don't have to hardly talk. This is where we take our transition from your past stories into, now we'd like to think with you about the future. And then we offer 2 future scenarios. Part of what you'll notice here is that I just see the slide itself. Anyway, with this, we're going to give them, we'd like you to have a look at this slide. We've got the some possible risks that could come with a warmer and drier Wyoming, possible risks with a warmer and wetter Wyoming. And based on all of your experience and the stories you were telling us earlier, let's start with the drier. What kinds of impacts can you anticipate could happen in a warmer and drier Wyoming? And what kinds of adaptation strategies? And then the same thing with the wetter. And I don't have my watch on. Am I done? All right, all right. And we have the conversation, I should have said this earlier, the people we are doing this with, we are using extension agents, and they select 4 persons in the community that they think will be interested. And that's the audience we've been talking to. We hope to continue talking with more using that. Part of why we want to work with the extension agent is the extension agent not only has the cultural capital of being there, but they will continue to be there. Because there's a chance this is a disturbing workshop. And we're not going to be there next week. And so we feel like part of what we are doing is cultivating community preparedness by situating this in infrastructure that is known and that will continue to be there. And a long-term goal is that to teach extension educators who'd like to become the facilitators so that this is a workshop they could run. So, a few points for humanities in the West. What Anders was going to say was that he is learning a new vehicle for delivering information through this community engagement work, turning science into a community narrative to build trust and understanding. And he said, as an economist, it never would have occurred to him to do work in rooms with community members. And he can just laugh at that, right? But that was never where he was going. We're trying to work with human nature rather than against it to explore radical uncertainty. And there's some of the science of communication behind this that I don't have time to go through. But we're trying to overcome the barriers to climate talk through storytelling. And then finally, that there are feedback loops between the researchers and extension. And we hope that we are building a virtuous spiral as an antidote to polarization. So with that, I'll stop.